Hello and welcome to this lecture. Today we are going to discuss pathogenesis of edema, and there are 6 points that explain the pathogenesis of edema. Number 1 is decreased plasma oncotic pressure, then increased capillary hydrostatic pressure, then lymphatic obstructions, then tissue factors such as increased oncotic pressure of interstitial fluid and decrease tissue tension, then increase capillary permeability, and last is sodium and water retention. So these all factors are responsible for the pathogenesis of edema, and we will discuss one by one. When we take a look of decreased plasma oncotic pressure, we need to understand that our blood contains plasma protein. So if, for example, there will be more extraction of the protein, plasma protein, outside to your body, then it affects the pressure which is known as oncotic pressure. And actually, oncotic pressure is the pressure that exerted by the plasma protein, and this is the pressure that is usually present in the vessels, in the blood vessels. So what happened in the disease like edema of renal disease, such as nephrotic syndromes or nephrotic syndromes? What happened that the protein tends to go outside more, and there will be increase of the excretion of the protein through your urine, and this result in edema, fluid retention. And how can we know that patient having the edema because of the nephrotic syndrome? The answer is that because of the fluid retention can be easily seen around the ankles, around the eye. The urine must be foamy because of the more excretion of the protein. So that's all indicators showing you the presence of the nephrotic syndrome. And why this occurs? Because there may be a defect in the kidney functions. Kidney is not properly function, and that happen, and that result in edema. The other disease that explained in this case is ascites of the liver disease, such as cirrhosis of the liver, which could be occur because of the person that drink alcohol too much, or because of a drug induced cirrhosis, or because of the hepatitis or any infection. And what happened that liver contain hepatocytes, and in this case that there will be a decrease of the albumin level. And why there will be a decrease of the albumin? Because the hepatocytes are not properly play their function to synthesize albumin, or in other case some scientists suggest that because of the fluid retention of water and electrolytes, and the albumin level become diluted. And then albumin is also a protein which plays important role for maintaining the oncotic pressure, and in that case that then because of the low albumin level, which we technically called hypoalbumin, it result in the decrease of the plasma oncotic pressure. The third is the presence of, we can say that, the hypoproteinemia. And what is meant by hypoproteinemia? It means that low protein level in the blood. We can split this word into two sections: hypo, which mean low, protein, which mean protein, and emia means the blood. So in low protein level in the blood, why? Because of the protein losing enteropathies, the edema will occur and fluid retention will be occur. Then there will be increased capillary hydrostatic pressure, and hydrostatic pressure is the force that normally tend to drive the fluid through the capillary walls into the interstitial space by counteracting the force of plasma oncotic pressure. So we have to understand that there are two pressures. One is plasma oncotic pressure, and the second is the hydrostatic pressure, and they work in a balanced way to maintain the normal physiological functions. And in a lot of diseases such as edema of cardiac disease, or ascites of the liver, or passive congestion, or postural edema, there will be imbalance of the hydrostatic pressure, and the increase of the hydrostatic pressure may produce the imbalance, and then it results in the edema. Then we have lymphatic obstructions, and normally the interstitial fluid in the tissue space escape by way of lymphatics. And we know that lymphatics plays an important role for clearance, especially of the interstitial fluid escape through this lymphatic system. But sometimes what happens, the obstruction of the lymphatic system causes blockage and result in localized edema, which known as lymphedema. And if we break this word lymph and then edema, so lymphedema, and that name is giving you the complete answer, that the edema caused by the lymphatic obstruction. And I mentioned here that in this case, the pressure from why this occur, because the pressure from outside on the main abdominal or thoracic duct, because of the tumor effusion of the serous cavities, may produce lymphedema. So why obstruction occur? They mention here because of the tumor, the main thing, which may be on the main abdominal thoracic duct, that result in blockage of these lymphatic system, and these are the signs that tumor is prevailing. Then effusion in the serous cavities is also responsible for lymphedema. The other reasons are, they mention occlusions of lymphatic channels by malignant cells may result in edema. Again, they are talking about the same thing. Either that obstruction occur because of the tumor, and that tumor is exerting the pressure, and that is why edema occur, or because of the lymphatic channels, the channels that are connected throughout the body to different body parts, they become blocked because of the malignant cells prevail through these channels, and they cause lymphedema. Then we have another disease, which is Milroy disease or hereditary lymphedema, which caused because of the genetic reasons. And why this disease occur? It occur because of the imbalance, or because of the impaired transport with accumulation of the lymph fluid, and this usually occur in the lower legs and feet at birth or develop in infancy. Then we have the tissue factors, which also play a role in causing the edema, and elevation of oncotic pressure of the interstitial fluids as occur due to increased vascular permeability and inadequate removal of proteins by lymphatic system. So they're talking about what happened, that if there is an increase of the vascular permeability, and what is meant by increased vascular permeability, it means leakage. And why leakage occur? Because of the inflammation or inflammatory mediators such as leukotrienes, or for example histamine, and that result in increased permeability or increased leakage. It is also an important factor in causing edema. Or they mention this inadequate removal of proteins by lymphatic system. It means that the lymphatic system is not working properly and not clearing the proteins adequately. So it is another important factor. Then there will be increased capillary permeability. And why this happen? Because of the capillary endothelium get injured by various pathogens such as toxins, and this increase of the capillary permeability leads to the enhance in the development of the gaps between the endothelial cells. So the endothelial cells, again, this is also going to explain the same thing, that the vascular leakage occur, and that result in increased capillary permeability, and it result in two type of edema. It could be generalized edema, or it could be localized edema. Then we have sodium water retention level, and this is very important because if you remember, I discussed about the albumin level and low albumin level. Because of the cirrhosis of the liver, there will be increase of the sodium and water retention, and result in dilution of the albumin that I discussed before. So sodium and water retention is also important factor for producing edema. And how it's work, for example, usually why sodium level high is usually occur because of the hypertension sometime, and because of the increase of the blood pressure, there will be more sodium level. And if there is more sodium level and more water retention, then it affect. Because why this happen, there is a series of mechanism, and we discuss one by one. One mechanism is that why the sodium and water retention occur. We know that the increase of the sodium and water retention leads to the blood pressure, and it also responsible for edema. But why this occur? So there will be some mechanisms. Like the number one mechanism is that there will be increase of antidiuretic hormone, and increase of the antidiuretic hormone such as vasopressin is responsible for increasing the retention of water. And because of the increase of antidiuretic hormone, which is present actually, which work in the posterior pituitary, in this case there will be the increase of sodium and water retention, and then the blood pressure increase. The other case, it could be caused because if someone have renal ischemia, and because of the renal ischemia, there will be decrease of sodium excretion, or and then it triggered angiotensinogen, which is an enzyme, and it triggered the angiotensin converting enzyme 1 and angiotensin converting enzyme 2, that result in the release of aldosterone, and that increase the sodium and water level. So this is the second mechanism. If a patient does not having the problem with antidiuretic hormones, then extra renal hormonal effect could be possible. And why this occurs? Because of the renal ischemia that result in decrease of the sodium excretion through renal tubules, and as a result they activate angiotensinogen, uh, and they contain two enzymes such as angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2, and that result in the release of the aldosterone, and as a result there will be more sodium and water retention. This will be the extra renal hormonal mechanism, because the hormones plays an important role for retention of the sodium. Then we have the third reason, which could be intrinsic renal reason. And why it occurs? Because of the mentioned hypovolemia. And what is meant by hypovolemia? Decrease in volume of blood in the body, and which occur because of the blood loss or loss of electrolytes or body fluids. So what happened that because of the hypovolemia, there are baroreceptors in our body in carotid sinus and aortic arch, and they activate vasomotor centers, which increase the sympathetic outflow that result in renal ischemia, and that renal ischemia leads to the decrease of glomerular filtration rate, and then there will be decrease of the sodium excretion, and that result in water retention. So in the intrinsic case, what happened that due to loss of blood, because maybe because of the accident or injury, the baroreceptors activated, and that activate from the vasomotor center, and that is responsible for renal ischemia, and that renal ischemia result in decrease of the glomerular filtration rate, and they try to retain sodium because of the loss of the sodium because of the blood loss, and that result in to retain more water and sodium. So that's one of the mechanism which we called intrinsic renal mechanism. And then the other one is the external renal hormone, which actually occur because of the renal ischemia. And again, what happened because of the renal ischemia that I mentioned here, in this case, the mechanism is intrinsic renal, where maybe hypovolemia occur. So the other mechanism is extrarenal hormone. And why this happen? Because of the hormone which is renin, angiotensinogen, and aldosterone. So we have three hormones. One is renin, then angiotensinogen, and then aldosterone, which will be released from the adrenal cortex. And they are responsible for maintaining the blood flow and in the kidney, and they are responsible for maintaining the blood pressure. So if, for example, renal ischemia occur and there will be a blockage of blood flow, then in that case the angiotensinogen enzyme with renin increase the production of aldosterone, and that increase of the aldosterone release causes the increase of the sodium and water retention. This is a picture of normal fluid exchange and the lymphatic outflow. If there is a proper lymphatic outflow from the tissues and from the arterioles, the pressure they mention here, that if the oncotic pressure is 25 mm of Hg, hydrostatic is 32 mm of Hg, and I already mentioned that there must be a balance between hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure that they mention here. So in normal circumstances, the homeostasis will be there, and then it result in the lymphatic outflows. And if it is properly working, then there is no edema, as you see in figure A. But in figure B, what happened if in case of the decrease of the plasma oncotic pressure, and if there will be more elimination of the protein, and that protein elimination occur as a result of imbalance, uh, imbalance occur, and then there will be the edema. Or then the other reason is because of the capillary increased capillary pressure, and because of the increase of the hydrostatic pressure, and in this case again the imbalance occur, and then the edema occur. Or because of the other reason, which is lymphedema, where the lymphatic obstruction occur, and if the normal mechanism is there between the hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure, but still the blockage occur, then it could lead to lymphedema. Then there will be tissue factor. It occur because of the increase of the oncotic pressure and decrease of the tissue tension that result in that edema. And then there will be the increase of the capillary permeability because of the vascular leakage, and that leakage result in the imbalance between hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure. So these are all reasons that could responsible for the edema. So thank you so much for today's lecture. Hope to see you again.